Hello, welcome to another episode of the Dre and Smiley, the Inner Circle podcast.
All right, Smiley man, we got a great guest here with us today. I'm going to read a quick bio, then we'll jump right into it. Erica Billups was a senior vice president at Archetype and a co-founder of Archetype Ascend, a division within the agency dedicated to providing strategic communications and support for BIPOC founders, executives, and VCs. With more than 15 years of experience in narrative development, executive performance building, and creative storytelling, she's especially passionate about uplifting, celebrating, and nurturing diverse voices in businesses and technology. Prior to joining Archetype, Erica served as a vice president at Outcast, where she worked with companies across a wide range of industries, including HBO, SoFi, Pinterest, Box, GitHub, Amazon, the Obama Foundation's My Brother's Keeper initiative, Caper Capital, and many, many more. Over the past several years, she has also focused on internal brand building and operations, leading staffing and resourcing, DEI, and internal communication functions. Erica is a proud graduate of Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida, where she achieved an MBA specializing in marketing. She is also a proud member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. With that, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I went to college in Atlanta.
Okay,
Fam
I'm
was right
from
down the
Atlanta.
street. You're from Atlanta, okay.
I
So
am.
Fam was right down the street. And so we went down there for all the things, as the kids say today, all the things.
Yep.
The band, the 100, what's the name of the band?
Marching 100.
Marching 100. One of the, I'm sure you would say the best HBCU
The
band
best
in the
band
nation.
in all the land. Yes.
And then, oh man, if you haven't been to an HBCU homecoming, for those listening, you have not lived your life. Your life is not complete.
That's right.
Good times, good times. So, but let's get into you and who you are and what you're doing today. So, tell me, how did you get into? Talk to me about your journey and background into the field of narrative development and executive platform building. Talk to me about your journey getting into that.
Sure. Well, so to most people, I'm in PR, or strategic communications, and honestly, I fell into it. I was a marketing major at Florida A&M. There was a PR program that was in the journalism department, and I was actually a journalism major my first year. And I wasn't sure about journalism, if that's what I wanted to do. So I figured if I got a business degree, I could go a lot of different directions. And so when it was time to graduate, I was in an accelerated MBA program at FAM. And so that means like you're working towards your MBA while you're also working towards your BA. And you have to do several internships before you can graduate to get that kind of real world experience. And so I was going on my last internship and I needed only that to graduate, no more coursework. So I figured it would be smart to look for one in a place I might want to live after graduation. And at that point, I had only lived in Atlanta and Florida. And I actually was born in Los Angeles and moved when I was really, really young. And so I had a very short list of cities that I was considering. I still have the list in my drawer somewhere. I don't think there was anything west of maybe Dallas, right? And so I told my mother about this list, and she was like, "Why don't you look at San Francisco? Like, why don't you have any California cities on there?" And at the time, I just felt like it was too far from home. And she said, home is just a plane ride away. You can always come home. And so she was the first one who planted San Francisco in my mind. And then I would say within the next couple of months, two different people came to me and said, "Oh, I was just in the Bay Area and I could see you living there, or I think you'd really like it." And they were not connected to each other at all. And so I'm, big believer in God. I feel like God will give you the signs. And so for me, that was a sign. I had never been to the Bay Area before, ever. So I decided that I would just like apply for internships in the Bay Area, check it out and see what the possibilities were. And at the time, and this is going to show my age, all of the internships were like, you looked on Craigslist to find them. And on Craigslist, marketing and PR were listed together. So they were kind of under one area. And most of the PR internships seemed like, okay, I could do that. Like that seemed easy enough, I thought at
Yeah.
the time. And I saw one internship, like I talked to a bunch of people, they all wanted me to go to New York for some reason, but this one internship at Outcast, it was really, really robust, and they wanted me to be in San Francisco. And so they had me come out to interview. And so that was my first time visiting the Bay Area when I interviewed for this internship, and I got it. And I was like, oh, I'll try this PR thing. And if I like it or I don't like it, or it's just, I don't like the Bay Area, I'll just go back to Atlanta and I'll figure it out. And so I got this internship, and it was, I mean, some called it a boot camp because they really put you through your paces. It was very hands on. And I just ended up loving it. Like I got to work with some really cool companies. Yahoo was my
Ooh,
first client, and I got to work on Flickr and Yahoo Mail and things like that. But I also got to work on companies like EMC, which taught me
okay.
technology in a whole different way. And so at the
Yeah.
end of my 6 months, they offered me a job, and I decided to stay in the Bay Area and
Wow.
stay at Outcast. And I was at Outcast, I think, 15 and a half years, just
Wow.
because I had such an incredible, for anybody who's worked at an agency, um, it's just a really incredible opportunity to work on a lot of different types of accounts.
Hmm.
You're not stuck working on one company. And for every company that you do PR or communications for, and for those that don't know what that is, basically you're helping a company tell their story to the public, whatever that looks like. So at
Mm-hmm.
the beginning, back 15 years ago, it was mostly like, especially in technology, you're reaching out to blogs and you're trying to get them to cover your clients, and you're trying to, get a reporter to help tell your story. It's different than marketing in that because you're working through a reporter, you have much less control of the story that you're telling, right? Like you're putting them in touch with an executive, you're coaching your executive on like, here's how to tell your story in an impactful way. Like here are the key messages that we want to get across. But once you give it to a reporter, you never know, right? Like
Right.
they bring their own perspective, they bring their own experiences, and every company goes through their own thing. So anyway, that's kind of how I got into it and
Okay.
how I got to where I am now.
Yeah. So tell me this. My niece just graduated college and she's working for P&G in marketing.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of picturing some of the similarities she might have experienced back when you first started as a recent grad and getting into corporate America, that sort of thing. Um, that's kind of what's going through my mind. But tell me, in terms of marketing and PR, what's the biggest difference aside from, you know, reaching out to reporters and blogs and things like
Hmm.
that? What does PR look like today? And what do you
Yeah.
think is the most effective mode that's being used today?
Right. Well, marketing and PR work hand in hand. They really, what we talk about is a integrated communication strategy, which means you have to figure out how to tell your story in many different ways and on many different platforms. I would say the biggest difference between communications when I started and where it is now is that um, there are a lot more channels and avenues for companies to tell their own story and their own words than it ever was before. Social media was just becoming a thing, right? When I first got started. And so now it's like, you can tell your story in your corporate blog. You have to have a strategy on Instagram and on TikTok. You have to have a strategy on LinkedIn. Um, so where I think the biggest difference is, because like a lot of times communications or PR actually comes from the marketing department. Like the CMO might be the one who's managing the PR communications team and things like that. So like I said, it really maps hand in hand, but like marketing is where a lot of your spend goes, right? So like when you're doing marketing, you're also doing big events, right? Like you're doing those with your customers or in the community, and things like that. You're doing market research to figure out, okay, I need to make sure that my product is in these stores because this is where my customer base frequents. So they're really a part of a larger strategy. But I would say, and I think a beautiful thing about it now is that as a brand, you really have a lot more control over the stories that you tell, and people, customers, clients can hear from you directly. So it allows you to have a lot more personality, a lot more fun with what you're doing. Because when you're filtering your message only through a reporter or a media outlet, like I said before, you don't have that much control. But if you're telling your story in your own corporate blog, and you're using that to reach customers as well, then that's another space for them to learn more about you and for you to build that relationship.
Sure. In terms of the control, the story comes to mind that I just read recently. I think it was earlier today. Kevin Durant has a lifetime deal with Nike. You may have heard about this.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Mm-hmm.
was being interviewed, I guess. And he had some new shoes that just came out, and someone was asking him, "So, tell us about the new shoes." Kevin Durant was like, it's nothing to write home about. And it was
Mm-hmm.
on Twitter. Nike took that, reposted
PR
it, and
nightmare.
said, yeah, exactly. Nike took that,
Yeah.
reposted it, and said, "Oh, we're writing home about it right now," with big
Yes.
eyes. Kind of made it
Mm-hmm.
spin, kind of fun. So,
Yes.
so with that in mind, I feel like there's a huge advantage because, like you were saying, companies have more control over the message that gets and how it gets out. The
Mm-hmm.
flip side of that is, in today's climate, sometimes one little phrase could be misinterpreted, or someone could take it and spin it, and
Mm-hmm.
now there's a bigger problem. With that, would you say that with the new platforms, the new technologies, is it harder, even though you have more control, in
Mm-hmm.
some ways, is it harder to come up with that creative marketing strategy that is a surefire win than it was before, just because of all of these platforms and the climate that we're in right now?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's ever surefire in communications because you could think that you have a really incredible marketing campaign that you're going out with, but it may not resonate, right? Like, so
Mm.
you go in there with the best um, ingredients, the best research that you have. You're taking feedback from folks so that you make sure that you're prepared. But
Mm.
at the end of the day, you have to remember it's a two-way conversation. It's not a one way. So, for instance, in the examples that you're talking about, and this has always been the case, honestly, where people have a voice, but it's just now that voice is using a megaphone. And something that somebody says on the internet can become a big thing. Like, 15 years ago when I was working on Flickr, which Flickr was, I would say, like the photo sharing platform for professionals before there was an Instagram. But we used to have to deal with quote unquote crises all the time because, like, if there is a technology issue and all of a sudden, 1,000 of your photos that you spent your time on are missing, and now people are complaining about that, and the reporter picks it up, then that becomes a thing, right? Like,
Mhm.
so where you're trying to figure out like how to explain what happened, how to make, assure the public it's not going to happen again, or whatever the case may be. The difference between then and now is instead of a reporter just picking it up, and that's where it ends, somebody could tweet about it, and now a bunch of people are piling on, and it's become this huge megaphone, and now more reporters are going to write about it, right? And
Right.
so it's always a two-way conversation, and you have to make sure, like, so in this case, not only are you working with reporters who have questions about how this happened, why this happened, what you're going to do in the future, and things like that, but also you have to make sure that your customer service is on point at all times, right? That you're
Mhm.
you're responding in the appropriate way, but also that you're not overreacting. because these things go in cycles. So sometimes things become viral and you reacting to it in a certain way, trying to mitigate the communication damage makes it worse. So there's a lot of conversations that need to happen. There's a lot of voices in the room. And this is where, when we talk about diverse voices, making sure you have diverse voices in the room, that's where it becomes important, right? Because a lot of times these types of things happen, or you'll see a bad reaction to a marketing campaign because it's tone deaf. And the reason it's tone deaf is because you don't have any Black or brown folks involved in the creation. And it could come down to, you don't have any Black or brown folks on your design team who
Mm.
recognize the fact that they need to be using more inclusive images. And then you don't have the right people on your communications team who are reviewing these things and saying like, hey, y'all, we can't go out with this because XYZ, and so that's why I'm so passionate, and so many people you see are talking about this now, because the more diverse voices that you have in the room, and it's not just, ethnic diversity, but it's also, do you have people with different abilities, right? Who can say like, hey, this is not accessible. These images that we're using, or this technology is not accessible. Or you have a room full of men and you're trying to market to women, so you really have to think about who you are trying to speak to, and making sure that your team is representative of the audience and the world around you, right? Because it's not just your customers, it's your partners, it's other organizations who you may want to link up with in some way. It's your vendors that you use. There's a lot of people in your ecosystem, and you have to make sure you're thinking about that, because it impacts your communications, it impacts your marketing in really significant ways.
I love that. I love that how you detailed all of that. You mentioned men marketing to women. The obvious first series or show I thought of was Mad Men, right? How back in the day,
Hmm.
how that world actually existed, where these people just kind of just, oh, we can market to any and everyone. All these men
Right.
have the right answers. And so tell me this. You also, and this, what you just shared actually does a great job in terms of segueing into a follow up question I have, which is Archetype Ascend, right?
Hmm.
Tell me more about Archetype Ascend and explain its mission in supporting BIPOC founders, executives, and VCs. And I'll pass it over to Smiley after that.
Sure. So I've only worked in global kind of agencies, and the benefit of that, and by global agencies, I mean like we may have offices in other countries, we serve other markets. And so Archetype is, pretty large agency with uh, offices all around the world. And so the benefit of that is you get to work with these really incredible brands. So Archetype, we work with Walmart, we work with Slack, MailChimp, so it's really exciting. But my partner and I have both been in this industry, he even longer than me, over 2 decades. Um, and we had only ever worked with like a handful of, you know, Black or brown founders, because this type of comm support from these types of agencies are very inaccessible when it comes to price, right? It's like most of the clients we work with are paying, tens of thousands of dollars a month. And so if you're an entrepreneur that's trying to get your business off the ground, you don't have that, and we already don't get funded nearly as much as companies that are founded by white males, right? So you're at a disadvantage already. And communications, a lot of people have a very narrow view of it. They see it as like, I need to be successful, like I need to get my company written about in the New York Times or Black Enterprise or all of these things. And that's one aspect, but communications is so much more than that. It's also your core foundational messaging. How do you talk about your product in a way that is differentiated, so that when you're going out into a crowded market, you stand out? What is your strategy? Because how you talk about yourself shows up so many different places. It's on your website, it's in your social media channels, it's in your marketing materials, it's in your partner communication, right? It's in your job descriptions, it's in your employee handbook. And so if that messaging is not consistent, then you're not necessarily going to cut through the noise, right? That's one aspect of communication, right? Working with the reporters, that's one aspect. What's your thought leadership platform? Like, you're a CEO, you're a founder. What do you want to be out there talking about? You know, like, how do you want to establish your expertise? And so we had a really great opportunity to come to Archetype, which is what actually a sister agency of Outcast. We're all in the same family. And the CEO is this really incredible woman who, and I don't use the term ally that much, you know, because I think it's overused and people don't always know what it means. So she has always been a great mentor. And she really was like, come over here, like, let's build this thing. Let's show that we can be a different type of agency. You have ownership over it. Like, you build it, you create it, and then you tell me how, like, we as an agency can support it. And so our mission is really to support, you know, founders who are trying to get their businesses off the ground, to, you know, help them at the core of, like, what are the communications need that they need to really accelerate their business growth. You know, we're here to help executives. So, you know, you may be a Black executive working within a larger company, but you want to learn how to build your profile. You want to figure out, like, how do I use my LinkedIn to make connections or to build my network? What should I be talking about so I can establish myself as an expert? Like, how do I get speaking opportunities at industry conferences? You know, and we do a lot of work with VCs because they are the ones who are working with these and funding these portfolio companies who need this type of work. So it's really a passion project. I feel like I'm, you know, stepped into my purpose a little bit with this work. And it's a lot of building, you know, for me, it's a building a business from scratch in a sense, because even though we're in a larger agency, we have to figure out, like, what's the pricing model that works for these types of clients? Like, how do we get more scrappy? Because when you have a lot of money to spend, there's more of an on ramp to, you know, to build a program. When people are, like, spending their hard earned money and they only got a little bit to spend, it's like, how do we get really specific with what your goals are and what's really going to move the needle for you? You know, so we're definitely in a building phase right now, but it's been about I think we launched at the end of February, so I can't do my math, but it's like, you know, 7, 8 months. So that's really what we're doing, and our goal is really that more of these agencies do the same thing. We're not trying to be the only ones, right? Like, we look at it like, if we're the only agency that's doing it, we're not having the impact that we want to do. Like, ultimately, we want other agencies to look and realize, like, you can have DEI teams, and I was the lead of the DEI team at my old job, and you know, and we did really, really great work. And you also have to be super intentional, because these clients aren't just going to come to you, right? Like, you have to be out at events trying to meet them. You have to be intentional about how you work with them and what you offer and how you build, how you partner, because there's a lot of other agencies and there or organizations that are doing really great work with entrepreneurs of color. You know, so how do we make sure that we're adding to that and we're not just here like, we're here to take over? It's like, no, we want to be a part of an ecosystem that helps make a larger impact.
What I thought was interesting is the way I love the way you described marketing and PR, because I always thought that LinkedIn, social media, Instagram, TikTok fell under marketing, never really thinking about the PR aspect. Because really, I think the way you said it's marketing is at the top, the CMO, but PR is under marketing, but it has its own distinct things to do versus the marketing doing trade shows and different events. Is that the way you described it?
So different companies set things up differently. You know,
Hmm.
there are certain companies where they have a global head of communications And like, so all of their PR kind of falls under that. There are certain companies that their CMO is in charge of their communication. So it always works hand in hand. It's just different in
Hmm.
how it's set up based on the company, right? But I think for communications, it's a like marketing, it's a lot more paid in some instances. It's like how you
Hmm.
use your money to really get your message out there. Communications is a lot more earned. So the way we talk about it a lot of times is like owned and earned. So
Okay.
earned is like you got to work hard to get those reporters to cover you, right? Like you don't have that much control, and I can't give you money to cover me. Like that's not part of PR. Like I have to convince you that this is a story that's worth telling and things like that. But like for instance, on the marketing side, you could pay out of your marketing budget for an advertorial, which is more like an advertisement, and there's less input from outside sources. A lot of times, to your point, Smiley, social media will fall under communications because you're not always like paying for that, right? Like you're building a strategy and figuring out like how you're going to post and things like that. But you can put marketing spin towards your social strategy, right? Because you can buy
Hmm.
targeted ads on X. I'm still getting used to calling it X, on X or
Uh-huh.
on Facebook, and on TikTok. So it all works hand in hand, but it's really the way I think about it. Like the PR is really the earned aspect, and the marketing is really the owned, where you have more control over it because it's your own channels and or you're paying money towards getting your message out in some way.
I love that description because I could see it clearly now. So when you work with the VCs and you mentioned that they're scrappy, and let's say the VC comes into the founders and the VC says, I have 100 grand for you. Would you say, just on average with your experience, that they take that money, 80%, 80 grand's going to marketing, 20 is going to building my influencers, or 50 grand, I'm going to pay an influencer to get my numbers out there? Or how do you see that money doled out between I'm building my company, I don't have a PR yet, I don't have a marketing yet, I'm building my brand, and I just got this windfall of 100 grand. What would I do, or what's the best way, just on average, from a founder's perspective?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that we do with VCs, because some will like earmark a certain amount of money for communications, and some will give you money for your growth plan, and you have to figure out where you're
Hmm.
gonna put that money. The beautiful thing about a lot of these VC firms is they have an in-house marketing person who their job is to kind of counsel these portfolio companies and things like that. But what we've been doing is partnering and coming in and doing a lot of trainings. So we've come in and we've done trainings on messaging positioning, like giving you the basics. Here's how to think about the process that you need to take yourself through. If you already have messaging, here's like a litmus test for you to figure out if you have the, if your messaging is actually as strong as you think it is, or things like that. I think to your point, Smiley, we see a lot of founders who are like, I don't have money to spend on this right now because I'm trying to get my product off the ground, right? Like, or
Hmm.
I have to figure out how to like a go to market strategy that's going to meet a certain um, target audience. For instance, we were just working with an ed tech founder with a really, really cool product. She's trying to reach administrators, right? She's trying to reach teachers and principals and things like that. So, you know, getting a story is great, but like if she gets a story in a technology outlet and those principals and teachers don't read that, then that's not helping her,
Right.
So what we always recommend is like start with your business goals because your communication strategy should ladder up to your business goals. And so, based on your business goals, what are the most important things? If people are just starting out, you know, I'm definitely not recommending they spend a lot of money on media relations because you have to get your core foundation together first. I would always
Mhm.
recommend people start with their messaging and positioning first, and put money towards that, making sure that that's right because that's going to impact everything that you do. If you do go to an industry conference and you have a booth or you're presenting or something like that, you need to make sure that your marketing materials are strong, right? And what you're saying is going to entice people to try your product. So I always recommend people start with messaging and positioning first, get their kind of integrated strategy together and then build from there. I think that's also one of the things like for Ascend and why we exist is so that we can help folks at that stage and at that level before they really start spending money, right? So like we're able to take on clients at a lot lower um, price point than we typically do as an agency because we just
Mm,
know like they're at a place where every dollar counts, and so we want to make sure that we are um, talking to them and understanding their goals so we can get really specific about like, okay, these are the kind of communications things that we should be targeting right now. And then once you get that together, maybe it's like you take a break and you come back when you have a certain customer, number of customers, and then we really ramp up. So there's
mhm,
no kind of one set thing that we tell people because it all depends on where you are in your product journey. What are your biggest goals and needs from a business perspective? Like what's going to move the needle for you? And then how do we help you achieve that? And we're also thinking differently about it, right? So one of the things we realize when it comes to helping executives is that a lot of these executives, they're working within larger companies and those companies aren't like funding them to build their personal brand necessarily, right?
mhm,
So you're paying out of pocket. So I can't ask you to pay, thousands of dollars out of pocket every month. Like that's completely unrealistic and it's not going to feel good on either
mhm,
side, right? So we're working to stand up an office hours program where people can pay a certain amount of money, to have hours of consultation. And that can either be for guidance for you to like go off and do things on your own, but at least you have the guidance and to know where to start and what to do, or to actually like, hey, can you help me, take some hours and help me build a plan, or take some hours and do some research and make a recommendation on like who are the influencers that I should be reaching out to, and then give me guidance on how to do that. So we're really trying to just think differently, get out of the kind of the box or the traditional way that we normally work, and just really think about what did this audience that we're trying to work with, what do they need, and how do we deliver it to them in a way that feels good.
One thing before I turn it back to Dre is you mentioned, I want to circle back. You talked about DEI
Mm-hmm.
and diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was in a meeting, I'm in the software space, and I didn't realize that DEI fell under ESG. At least at this company,
Mm-hmm.
when he started talking ESG, then he mentioned DEI. I said, I thought this was an ESG meeting. He's like, well, that's part of ours too. And I'm like, really? Then I Googled it, of course, and YouTubed it.
Mm-hmm.
And in some companies, DEI does fall under ESG and all that different stuff. So from your company, do you work primarily only on the DEI part, or do you also go to the umbrella ESG, or is that part of your programs as well, or is it all of the same?
No, it's different at every company. I mean, I'm a big believer that DEI should come from the very top of your organization, or
Hmm.
else it's not going to be impactful. But we do work with clients. We do work with clients, larger kind of corporate clients, on their DEI initiatives. And those clients, they look at DEI like different clients. Are their DEI program focuses on different things, and so like we work with right now we're working with DocuSign, who has an incredible, I mean, I cannot speak more highly of her if I tried, incredible chief diversity officer named Aisha Berry, and she's just in there doing really incredible work in making the company more diverse and in every way, right? Like, so making sure that their hiring and their retention policies are inclusive, making sure that leaders are armed with information to be the most inclusive leaders and things like that. And so our work is really in helping um, make sure that she's communicating her story internally and externally. So you're doing all this great work, but how do employees know about the work that's being done in the company? How do they have a voice? How do they have visibility, so that it's transparent? And then how do you talk about that externally? So as you're trying to attract talent to the company, and also just like she has really great perspective on how companies kind of need to um, run to make this work impactful. And so, making sure that she's using her social channels, making sure that if she's out there speaking at conferences, she is armed and prepared, and which she always is. And so that's part of the work that we do, is like helping companies tell their DEI story. But it's also, like, companies are out here and they're working with diverse audiences, right? Like, so we work with TikTok, right, who has amazing creators of color and diverse creators on their platform. So how are they supporting those creators? Like, how are they making sure that those creators have a voice and that their story is being told? So that is also part of the work that we do. And then, as always, I'm making sure my own company is living up to those ethos. And so making sure that we're bringing in diverse talent to work on these things. But also, it's been really interesting for me because I'm always thinking as a Black woman about DEI. And when we started this division, Archetype Ascend, I had to be really intentional about making sure that the full agency felt like they were a part of it, not just the BIPOC folks at the agency. But it's like, we want everybody to feel like they can work on and support these clients, right? And we have to make sure that we're living the same values that we are saying that we want these clients to be living, right? So, like, how do we make sure that we're putting our arms around people and they feel like they belong and they feel like they have a place in this thing that we're building? So, DEI is one of those things where it should be touching every aspect of your organization. And if it's not, then you need to reevaluate. And we're happy to help you do that.
Love that. Eric, I got to tell you, I wish we had at least another hour, because I have at least 7 to 8, maybe 10,000 questions more to ask you. But we're going to transition into the final 4. But here's one question, actually 2 questions before we do. Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated, Sorority Incorporated. Talk to me about how being a member of that sorority impacts the values and who you are and what you do and your career.
Sure. I love being a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I think I was just, coming from Atlanta and going to an HBCU, it's really important to me to be surrounded by and to uplift um, my community, but especially, the Black community. And living in the Bay Area, I think you have to be even more intentional about that because it's so spread out. It's not always as diverse as where, like, the places that I come from. And so I wanted to be part of an organization that was having an impact on the community, but as a Black woman, that was also having a profound impact on the community that I came from. And so I think for me, it's just my parents raised me to always be giving back. And, that like age old adage, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I have been blessed with a lot. And so I want to make sure that I am always giving back to my community. And so through my service and my sisterhood with AKA, I'm able to do that in a way that is just more impactful than what I could just do on my own, right? Like, that impact is multiplied. And so that has, it's been a great honor. My godmother is an AKA, and she's the one who always had the dream for me. And she's one of the best women that I've ever met. One of the most giving, one of the most caring. And I'm surrounded by that now. And also, I would say being a part of the organization is just a reminder to me to always be striving to be my best, because I'm surrounded by women who are incredible and professional and poised and just, hold themselves to a very high standard. And so I can't let that standard slip. I have to live up to that standard that they're setting for me. And so it's just, I try to bring that spirit to everything that I do. And I'm just very, very fortunate to be part of an organization that pours into me and allows me to then pour into my community.
Love that. All right. So here's the transition question before we get to the final four. So we are hoping that this podcast is viewed and listened to millions and millions of people. A number of them probably know you. What's one
Hmm.
thing that people don't know about you that you wish they knew?
Oh, that's so hard because I'm such an open book. Um, I'm such an open book. What do I wish people knew about me? You know, oof. I think I wish that people knew that. Oh my gosh, I should have prepared better because
You're good. You're
Yeah,
good.
you're good.
this is such
So,
a hard
by the way, this is
question.
this is the typical response. You're not alone. Everyone goes through these series of thoughts and feelings, and you're not alone.
You know, I think I would just, I don't know that I want people to know this about me, but I am definitely a person who I thrive in organized chaos and I'm extremely hard on myself. Because sometimes, like, I definitely have, I would describe my style as warm but direct, so I've definitely had to work over the years on like, okay, that was really straightforward. And next time, like maybe massage that a little bit. But I think people know that I'm very empathetic. But I am very, very hard on myself. And so that's something I try to work on. It's like I feel like that saying, give yourself grace.
Mm,
Like it's become a big thing this last few years, especially during COVID, because we're all trying to give ourselves grace. That's not an
yeah.
area that I'm good at, giving myself grace. And so I think a lot of that is what drives me, is being so hard on
Mm,
myself. Um,
mm,
and the organized chaos part is just because, like, as an operator, quote unquote, like as somebody who does a lot of operations, I think like there's different ways to do that. Um,
mhm.
some people are very exacting, right? Like if they don't have all their stuff together, then they can't function. Whereas me, I'm the type that, like, if you could see my tabs open on my computer screen, I probably have, and I kid you not, like 260 tabs open at a time. But I can always find, like, I have systems to find what I need. And it's helped me be successful, right? And so there is no one way to be successful, and especially like in operations and stuff like that. So I could probably be more successful if I was more organized, but it works for me. So I don't know if that gets to the heart of the question that you're asking, but
It
that's all I got for
does.
you right now.
Love it.
See,
Love it.
I thought I've been admiring that piece of art behind you. I thought you were going to say I'm a closet artist or I'm an expert art collector, because that piece behind you is amazing. Is that a screensaver, or is that really your art behind you, or do you have a
No,
background?
this is my dining room. This is
Oh,
Love
so
it.
I am actually a big art lover. I would collect more if my husband was not so he's like, I do not want art on every inch of our wall. But I have a lot of one of a kind art at my house. I love art. I could go and just walk around museums for hours. This
Nice.
the funny thing about it is this painting or piece of art was given to us by my cousin or my husband's aunt. And both my mother and his mother was like, ugh, like that. Like they were not fans of it at all. And we actually love it. So I appreciate it because yes,
Yeah.
I love art and I can show
Yeah.
you so many pieces, but I won't.
Yeah.
well,
I love it. I love
awesome.
it.
Well, thank you. Well, the first question in the final four: if you were to have dinner with you and three others at the table, who would you want at your table, alive or dead, and why?
Um Bomani Jones. I'm a
Hmm.
big Bomani Jones fan. I'm a big sports fan, and I think he does such a beautiful job of blending kind of sports and politics. And
Yeah.
also, he lived in Atlanta for a long time, so he talked about Atlanta a lot. And I find him endlessly fascinating. So he would be one. Um, Muhammad Ali would be one. Muhammad Ali in his prime. My dad is a big collector. and a huge Muhammad Ali. He was a stan before we knew what stans were. Okay, so his whole base was
Okay.
covered in Muhammad Ali stuff, and I just, I've read a lot of books about him, and he's another person that I have so many questions that I would love to ask
Yeah.
around, even just like his decision not to be drafted and stuff like that. So he would be another big one, and then I would say my grandmother. Um,
Oh,
just because both of my grandmothers were incredible women. I was extremely close with, I call her Gami. That was my Gami, my name for her. But she lived in New Orleans, and she was spicy, and
Mm,
she passed away right before I got married. And
mm,
so that, I would just love for her to see where I am now, and
mm.
my life and my kids, and be able to catch up with her. So I think those would be my top three.
Love it. Love it. What's been your greatest success?
My greatest success has been building the life that I have now.
Mm,
And I say that because I took a big risk in moving to the Bay Area. I knew two people. I had never been here before. I knew two people. And I really I had to build my network. I had to build my friends, like I had to, and as y'all know, making friends as an adult, where you don't have a
yeah.
school to bring you together or things like that,
Right, right,
is
right.
not easy.
It's not.
Um, and I feel really proud of myself that I was able to stand on my own 2 feet, to take a risk, to try something completely new for myself, and living in a place that I had visited one time, and that was the interview for my job. And now I'm married, I have kids, I'm in a sorority, like I've built this career. And so I think my biggest success is just the life that I have built for myself, because there's nothing
Mm,
wrong with going home, like I think it's amazing, and I'm trying to go back home, to be quite honest. But, you know, to know that I was able to do this without having my family here, or having, like, I really didn't have any crutch to lean on, right? I had to,
mm.
like, make it for myself, or not. That makes me feel extremely proud.
Love
that's
it.
awesome. You had to sink or swim, and you swam.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the third final for question is, what is your superpower? What is something that's uniquely Erica? Superman flies, the Hulk has his strength, the Flash is really fast. What is your uniquely you superpower?
So this is going to sound really conceited, and I don't mean it to be, but I think I'm a really good mentor. Like I really love sharing my knowledge and my experience with folks who are, coming after me in some way, or who seek my guidance. Like, I really care about developing people, or helping them develop. And I think part of that is because people have poured into me so much in my life. But I feel like any job that I have, I'm always asked to, like, can you work with this person? Can you mentor this person? Or just naturally it happens. And a lot of the folks that I've worked with in the past, like the things that they say about me, the things that are most impactful for me and most meaningful, have to do with my willingness and ability to mentor. And I think part of that is just because, like, I'm very honest. I'm honest about the struggles that I've had. I'm honest about where I'm good and not good. And I try to create a safe space for other people to be honest, whether that's you
Mm,
need to fall apart and you need somebody there to listen, or you need somebody to be really real with you and be like, okay, girl, the way that you doing this is not is not the way. But let's talk about the way. Um, so I think that if I had a superpower, I think my ability to pour into people in that way, but in a really authentic way,
mm.
and just being truthful and being honest, and using my own story to help guide them, that would be my superpower.
But you know what? I just want to circle back because I didn't see anything conceited in that. Everyone would love to have a mentor that would put them on the right path or be direct with them. Because when you're dealing with founders, they want to. I would imagine they want to know the truth. They want to know the harsh truth because your directness saves me money.
Yeah, some
So,
some people do. Some people want the truth. But yes,
You can insult me for, I don't care if you insult me, but don't cost me any money. I'd rather take the insult for free than let me be
Yeah.
feeling good about myself and I just lost a couple grand. It's like, oh man.
can I go back to a question? I'll be
Yes,
really
you
brief.
Yes, of
can.
course.
Yeah,
Okay,
anytime.
so the question about what do I wish people knew about me? It takes me back, Smiley, to the conversation that you and I had months ago when I met you. I was a rape crisis counselor for 10 years. And I, again, I fell into that because I got into an argument in college. And I still remember the exact person I was arguing with, but I won't call them out. I got into an argument about Kobe Bryant, and I was
Uh-huh.
super passionate about the argument. And he was like, "Have you been a victim before?" And I hadn't been.
Right,
I
right.
had not been, but it did make me question, like, why am I so passionate about this? And so I decided to just volunteer at a rape crisis center. And you have to
Ooh.
go through every state that you want to volunteer, and you have to be certified, and it takes like 40 hours.
Mm.
So I got certified in Atlanta. Then when I went back to school, I got certified in Florida. When I moved here, I got certified. And the reason I would want people to know that about me is because I think that set me on a path to make sure that I was infusing purpose into every aspect of
Mm.
my work. Because when I went back to Tallahassee, they didn't have just a rape crisis center. So it was a place called Refuge House, which is a really incredible organization. But they also did domestic violence support. So I did rape crisis support groups. I helped people get restraining orders as my actual like paying job. I worked in their thrift store that benefited battered women. I worked in their nursery, where women would bring their kids who were staying in the shelter. And so I always thought that I was going to work in nonprofit for the rest of my life. That's what I thought I was going to do. And then I realized, like, my lifestyle did not it was not conducive to that at the time. But I remember my old
Right,
boss,
right.
this woman Elaine Davis, who was my boss at the courthouse. She told me, she said, one of the beautiful things about you is that you have a business mind but a social worker."
Mm.
And so
Uh-huh.
I have really tried to infuse that level of care and empathy and purpose and impact that I got from being an advocate for survivors into the work that I do day to day. And I've always looked for opportunities within my organization to make an impact. So at my first job at Outcast, we had a philanthropy program, and at the time it was kind of defunct. Like, they weren't really doing anything with it. And I was
Mm.
like, "Hey, can I revive this?" And they're like, "Sure, please." And that's
Wow.
really how I
Wow.
started doing social impact work within my career.
Mm.
Um, so people see now, they see the work that I do and they see the impact, but I don't think most people know that that's kind of what started me on this
Mm.
path. So the work looks different, right? It's not for
Wow.
the same cause necessarily, but the part of it is still the same.
Two things come to mind as you share that. One is it was clear to me that you had to figure out a way to afford the red bottom heels, but still get but still get back to the community. The second thing, more seriously, is that yeah, you really at your core, it's clear to me you're all about pouring back into the community. This is something that you started in Atlanta, on to Tallahassee. Now that you're in the Bay Area, and it's just grown. It's just grown since
Yeah,
then, which is just um, it's beautiful. You know, people we don't meet too many. We had a guest recently, Smiley and I. At the conclusion of that interview, we both what stood out to us is, wow, that guy's really selfless. You also have that. It's like a I don't know if it's a gene or what it is, but you clearly have kind of a selfless soul or whatever it is. I don't know how you would describe it, and it's refreshing to
thank
see.
you.
It's refreshing to see. So,
Thank
the
you
last
so
final four
much.
questions. Yeah, yeah, no problem. If you were to write an autobiography, what would the title be?
Oh my God, I've thought about this actually a lot. If I were to write an autobiography, I think it might be called Organized Chaos. I really do.
Ah,
I think it might be called Organized Chaos, just because I feel like that's how I function sometimes. And from the outside, it doesn't look like that, but from the inside, it can feel kind of chaotic. But it's me, right? It's like it's the way that I have come to be. I feel like it would be cliche to say it would be something about giving back. It probably would, but
okay.
but I think if I had to describe myself um, in that way, because even I have a journal, and that's what I wrote the title. It was called Organized Chaos, and I think it's more so because it just gives me permission to not be perfect, to be a little
Mm,
messy, because life is messy. And
sure.
so I've tried to embrace like all the areas of my life, whether that looks chaotic or not. So I think that would be it. But I don't expect that I would write an autobiography, because there's too many things that I would have to leave out for my parents' sake. So, so it really doesn't matter.
Awesome.
You can change the names to protect the innocent.
Yeah.
Uh, no, my
No,
parents
that
would
would work.
know.
Huh? That
So
would work.
yeah, no, it's not too many innocent people in these stories. So
It's more like names are changed to protect the guilty.
right, right.
Yeah,
Well,
trust me, I'm taking mine to the grave, so I understand.
Yes, no, thank you.
Yeah,
well,
Smiley.
Erica, I am so excited that one, meeting you, and two, for you to be on the podcast. So thank you very much for sharing your wisdom, your experiences, and your awesomeness with us and our listeners. Thank you very, very much.
No, thank you
It's been
all, and thank
refreshing.
y'all for the work that you're doing with this podcast. And just there's so many incredible people doing incredible things, and so I just love learning about them through this platform.
Awesome,
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thanks for being on the pod.
Thank you.